There is a strange thing about MMORPGs that nobody tells you when you first log in. You can never truly experience them twice. You can replay the raids, recreate the character and return to the same world years later. But that first journey, the feeling that an entire world exists waiting for you, that only happens once. And the weirdest part is, when I was younger, I didn't even know MMORPGs existed. I spent my nights as a Quake 3 player, living for the raw twitch reflex speed of competitive shooters. I didn't care about lore, I didn't care about loot, and I definitely didn't care about MMORPGs. Back in the day, this was the pinnacle, Quake 3 Arena. It was the epitome of esports before esports was even a household word. No loot boxes, no auto-aim, no shortcuts, nothing. But you and your enemy, a railgun, and the sheer adrenaline of outplaying someone who was just as fast as you were. I was convinced this was the peak of gaming. I thought, why would I ever play anything else? It was 2008. I was sitting in the back of the classroom, totally invisible, listening to two of my classmates spiral into a conversation that sounded like pure gibberish to me. They were obsessing over drop rates for tier 8 shoulders and arguing about rotations and DPS checks for some boss I'd never heard of. So I'm sitting there, just a guy who spends his nights playing Quake 3. Pretty much the only game I knew and understood. I was totally confused about everything they talked about. Shoulders, bosses and DPS checks. To me it sounded like a total different language. Finally, I turned around to them and just said, "Look, guys, I'm with you 5 days a week hearing about magic loot and raids. I have to know, what the hell is this game?" They looked at me like I had two hats. "You never played WoW?" they asked. That was the day the hook went in. They told me to just play the free trial. "Get it out of your system," they said. They had no idea they weren't just hooking me on a game. They were hooking me on a journey that would eventually lead me to ask the question, is this game an adventure or just a virtual office where we clock in for loot? So the game is on. I finally installed World of Warcraft and stepped into the world my classmate had been obsessed with for years. And this is where it gets strange. I remember those early days not like a game, not at all. But like a memory of a place I actually lived. It almost felt real. Every quest, every forest path, every mob I encountered, it felt like a life or death choice. I wasn't just a guy at a computer. For the first time, I felt like the hero of a story. And the strange thing is, you only get to feel that once. The first world, the first character, the first time everything feels enormous. But that feeling, it started to slip away the moment I realized I was doing something wrong. The thing is, I had to catch up. My friends were already at Endgame, so they jump into my group, boost me through some of the dungeons and hand me some gear I didn't even earn. It felt generous at the time, but looking back, it was the beginning of the end. Even surrounded by people, I somehow felt disconnected from the world itself. I was playing World of Warcraft like a single player game in a massive living world. I was in such a hurry to reach the finish line, to be where my friends were, that I missed the point of being there at all. I was skipping the mud that makes a game like this so amazing, and I didn't even realize I was doing it. I was fast traveling through the best parts of the adventure, just to sit in storm wind at the end of the day and wonder why it started to feel so empty. I was so close to the end game, but I just couldn't do it. I realized I was playing in a massive online world, but I felt completely alone. I didn't want to quit the genre, but I definitely didn't want to keep feeling like a gear grinding cog in a machine. We were constantly looking for the next big thing. When Warhammer Online was announced, it felt like a gift. I still felt like I was late to the party with World of Warcraft, so always run in, never stopping to look around. And I thought Warhammer was my chance to be there from the start. But Warhammer taught me a brutal lesson. Not every journey is worth my time. My friends who had been down this road 100 times before immediately started looking for the fastest route. In Warhammer, that meant spamming battlegrounds. It was fun, sure, but it felt like a chore. not an adventure. Then the floor dropped out. After only a few days, my friends quit. They told me the endgame was empty and that there was nothing to do but PvP. I didn't get it at first. I'd never actually finished an MMO before, but the question stuck in my head: if the entire journey is just a race to a finish line that doesn't exist, then why are we doing this? That's when I stopped thinking only about games and started thinking about time. I started looking at these games, these massive, time-consuming worlds, and asking the question that nobody else was asking: how much of my life is this actually respecting? Then, Aion happened. At the time they were calling it the WoW killer. It was my chance to hit the reset button, a clean slate. No friends to boost me, no pressure from the outside world, just me, a brand new world, and the people I'd meet along the way. Aion ignited something I didn't know I needed: genuine curiosity. I wasn't reading spreadsheets anymore, I was reading lore, studying builds and trying to understand the why behind everything. It wasn't about being the best on the leaderboard or being the fastest in the world, it was about being an expert in the environment you lived in. That curiosity led me to form a legion, and that's when I finally grasped the true strength of an MMO, a shared goal within a shared world. And it wasn't just about making friends in the world, it was also about the enemies. In Aion, the endgame was a living, breathing place. It wasn't some cold lobby where you get matched with randoms you'll never see again. You knew exactly who the other players were. You knew the names of the top legions on the enemy faction, you knew who had the god tier gear and who needed to be avoided. If you saw someone from the enemy legion that killed your friends yesterday, you didn't just queue up for a match, you felt that history. You knew that guy couldn't be taken on 1v1. You had to call for backup, you had to strategize, you had to rely on your own legion or faction to back you up. That interaction, that weight of knowing who you were fighting, gave the world a meaning. It made every encounter personal. It taught me that in a world where everyone has a face and a reputation, your actions actually carried weight, and that is exactly what modern matchmaking has completely stripped away. I realized my mistake in WoW. I had been skipping the adventure to get to the endgame, but in Aion I learned that the endgame isn't a place you reach, it's the people you do it with. The number one rule of fun in any game, or honestly any part of life, is pretty simple. Don't skip the journey just to reach the finish line. You're supposed to carry the journey with you until the end. But little did we know, we would get a second chance.
Someone once said that you can't go home again, but they lacked vision. And a temporal discombobulator.
And that's why we went back. Not for the gear, not for the meta. We went back because we were finally ready to walk that path again. But then, a few months in, the old habits started creeping back. The spreadsheets, the best in slot lists, the rush to the end game, and I realized the game didn't change. We did. We spent years begging for those worlds to return, wanting to go back to these vanilla classic days. But the moment we got them back, we brought our adult anxieties with us. We brought the spreadsheets, the raid logging, and the desperate rush to the finish line. And that's when it hit me. We are all chasing the same thing. Better gear, faster clears, higher rankings, and the perfect build. The perfect rotation and the perfect character. And somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, the adventure slowly became a checklist. That's the strange thing about MMORPGs. The most unforgettable parts were never the moments when we finally had everything. It was when we had nothing. When we were underleveled, lost in zones that we didn't understand, running across the world on foot because we couldn't afford a mount, getting destroyed by enemies we weren't ready for, and meeting random people who eventually became guildmates, rivals, or friends. The struggle was the adventure, but the closer we got to the end game, the more we started treating the game like a problem to solve instead of a place to live in. We optimized the mystery out of it. And maybe that's the real paradox of MMORPGs. The game rewards you for reaching the end, but the magic was almost always the climb. Because when you finally have it all, the gear, the status, the achievements, and whatever it is you're looking for, there's nowhere left to go except back to the thing that actually mattered in the first place, the people you shared the journey with. And that's why the first MMO experience is so special. You can't replace curiosity, you can't replay not knowing, and you can't replay the feeling that an entire world is waiting for you. And maybe the real endgame wasn't the raid. Maybe it was the adventure itself.